Good afternoon. I'm Denise Hasty with the HEC of Missouri, and I'm also the 2020 SLSAE president. I'd like to welcome you to the first ever SLSAE webinar. We appreciate everyone's flexibility as we moved from an in-person luncheon to this webinar format. At this time, I'd like to welcome the members of the board of directors who were able to participate in today's call. We have on the call our President-elect Byron Keelan, CAE from Materials Technology Institute, our immediate past president, Meg Stegna, who is with the Greater St. Louis Dental Society, and one director was able to make the call today, Liz Poyster, with Electrical Apparatus Service Association. Normally at this time, I would outline upcoming events, and we have 3 events scheduled prior to next month's membership luncheon. The status of these is obviously still very much in flux. I will mention them, but I will urge you to watch your emails and check our website for more information. We have a membership SIG that's currently scheduled for next Wednesday, March 25th, and of all events, this one to me is the most likely to suffer from the current situation that we have. We have a communications SIG scheduled for Tuesday, April 7th, and a CEO SIG scheduled for April 9th. The board of directors is meeting at 1:15 following today's webinar, and no doubt discussions will be made and decisions will be made about these upcoming events and perhaps others. We do have one guest participating today, and we'd like to welcome Adele Giannino with the Catholic Health Association. Adele, we hope you find today's webinar fruitful and useful for you in your career. I'd like to take a moment to thank our sponsors. Without our ongoing sponsors, the SLSAE simply could not provide the services that it does. We have one platinum sponsor, and that's Q&A Business Solutions, who is our association management company, and 3 silver sponsors, BKD Incorporated, Enterprise Bank, and Engage. Our speaker today is Katie Magoon. She's the owner of People Solutions Center, a human resources consulting firm in St. Louis. Her client projects span all aspects of the HR practice, including workplace dynamics, talent acquisition, performance management, onboarding, compensation, and compliance. The combination of her HR background and practical experience leading large teams in an operational setting allows her to advise leaders on how to best leverage their greatest asset, their people. Over the course of her 15+ years of leadership experience, Katie has always had a remote team of employees. So no doubt she has some really important pieces of information for us today, and we're grateful to have her share her experience and her best practices with us. Katie?
Great. Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here today. It's always nice when you get introduced as somebody's first ever of any event. So I think this will be fantastic, and hopefully you'll walk away with a lot of great information. As Denise mentioned, one of the interesting parts about my background is that I have not only always led virtual teams, I've actually never had anyone in my entire leadership experience, which spans more than 20 years, I've never had someone working in an office with me. I became a leader when I was with Progressive Insurance as the recruiting director, and I was located in St. Louis. The role was supposed to be in Cleveland, and so I got to work remote. My entire team was spread across the United States. I've onboarded multiple employees who I didn't meet for a good 3 to 6 months before they started. And so I'm actually in the unusual experience of all of the changes that are going on right now are things that this was always the way I've managed and led. But there are some really important tips and tricks that will make all the difference as you go through this. A couple of key housekeeping things before we get started. Since this is the first webinar, at least for this group, you probably have all participated in webinars somewhere along the way. But we are going to do a couple of things during the course of this session that are intended to help give you options on how to engage when you're with folks on webinars so that you can make these as engaging as possible when you're working with your employees. So a couple of just good housekeeping reminders to tell people at the beginning of every class session. First and foremost, please make sure that you mute your phone and or your computer if that's to make sure that we don't pick up any background noise. And most importantly, a couple of things about Zoom. If you're using, since this may be the first time some of you are using Zoom, please make sure you have the option to raise hands. And I'm going to actually ask throughout the course of the presentation for some hand raising, which will give me a good indication on experiences people have, and also if you have questions, you can use a raise hand. To test this out, can everyone just take a moment and quickly find the raise hand option and put it up so that I know everybody knows how to use this? Fantastic, fantastic, great. That's wonderful. So we'll talk as we go through the session today about why that hand raising is so important and how to use it through your conversations with your teams, particularly as folks may be working from home and working remotely for the first time. The other piece that we will have available is both the Q&A and the chat section will be up throughout the course of the event. Please feel free to put in your questions. We'll answer them. I'll stop along the way to answer what I can, and then we'll also spend plenty of time at the end getting to any of the questions that you may have. So to give you all a little bit of background on myself before we jump in, I have spent 20 years in corporate HR. I left Progressive Insurance 4 years ago to start my own business as an HR consultant. And I primarily work with small to mid-size organizations where maybe they don't have the staff to have an internal HR person, but they certainly have HR needs. And one of the things that we are certainly finding in these last couple of weeks is that at the end of the day, things are changing, and we do all have a lot of HR needs. But one of the important pieces of those is not just the sheer compliance side of HR, which is certainly on a lot of employers' minds these days, but most importantly, how do we connect with people? So by a show of hands, how many of you have folks that as of the last few days are now working from home as their primary means of working? I'm guessing we're going to get most of them here. Yes. Yep, it looks like we've got most of the crowd. So, and for some of you, this will be absolutely the first time that your employees have been working from home. Others maybe have tested it along the way. Maybe people did it a couple of days a week. And for a few, you may have had situations where your staff has been in this all along. But the reality is, whether this is the first time you've done it or you've been doing it all along, things have changed even about how we think about work from home under the circumstances. There are going to be things that you as a leader need to do differently because it's not just telecommuting, it's not just working from home, but there are all of these external factors that are coming at individuals from a personal perspective, from a health perspective, from a financial perspective, that are quite honestly just vying for people's attention and most importantly, stressing people out. And so everything I give you today is really going to be about not just how do you do the mechanics of check the box but from work from home, but more importantly, how do you truly lead in a virtual environment? And that's very different than managing in a virtual environment. And so this is about how you show up as a leader and ways that you can help ensure that you're not just taking care of people's work needs, but most importantly, also their personal needs, so that when we get through this and we come through the other side, folks are ready to engage, folks are in a good place, and most importantly, along the way, you've had compassion and the ability to get people through some really tough situations. So with that in mind, there are 4 key pieces that are really important when you are leading virtually. And I cannot stress enough, these 4 pieces need to be, whatever wall is your backdrop for your office today, these 4 words need to be front and center when you're leading folks. Communicate, engage, focus, and support. And while we may be thinking like, wow, that's a lot on how we're taking care of people. But at the end of the day, good leaders are taking care of people, and people that are being well taken care of, regardless of what the economics of things end up being, are going to end up being the most loyal, the folks that we're able to bring back, and most importantly, the folks that likely position you in a place where as we get through this and this turns back, these are the people that are always going to go the extra mile for you going forward. So people really, really matter all the time. Cannot stress enough how important that is today in the world that we're working with. We're going to walk through each of these 4 areas through the course of our conversations today and really stress and give you some practical tips of things that you could start doing, hang up this phone and start doing as a matter of this afternoon. So things that are easy to implement, they're fun, but they also help you get work done, which is really important because a lot of businesses, while all of the craziness is going on, are still needing to attend to clients, get things accomplished, be there to support their bases. And it's important that we understand how to help people do that well. So let's jump into this first area of communication. Today's webinar is a perfect example of leveraging technology. This is what it's all about. Leveraging the technology that we have to make sure you can connect and communicate as frequently as possible. You'll notice the bullet point number 3, connect daily. When people work virtually, and particularly have all of these other components going on in their life, it's really important that they get connected to someone on a daily basis. That does not need to be a 1-hour phone call. That can be as easy as a chat, a text message, hey, let's jump on a phone call. I want to know how you're doing. But people need to hear from their leaders on a daily basis as you go through this. Some of the things I've even been doing with clients is honestly just an email at least every day that says, hey, here's what we're looking into for you. We don't have answers yet. For example, the bill just passed Congress last night. I don't have answers because we're still pouring through it, but an email to clients to say, hey, just so you know, that's what we're working on. Don't spend your time. We've got this. It's the same concept with your teams. If you know what's going on or you've got something you're working on that they are likely waiting for the answer for, you need to be communicating that regularly. Technology comes into place through all of the tools that we're using today. So things like Zoom meeting, GoToTraining, GoToMeetings, if that's your preference, webcams, all make a difference in helping people connect. And the more creative you can get with it, the better in terms of allowing people the opportunity to still feel connected to other human beings. The other piece that's important is holding weekly team meetings. So even if you're connecting daily through an email or a quick video that you're sending to people, once a week, the team needs to get together. One of the key reasons, this is always important when leading virtual teams, but it's going to be crucial in the next couple of weeks. Many of you have people who have never worked from home before. One of my friends who works for an association moved from Ohio to St. Louis a year ago and moved into her own home, was so excited to work from home. It was her first time ever, and she was so excited to be able to live in the city where her family was. So this was a big deal for her. It was a big win. She called me 2 weeks in and she's like, how do you do this? I am going crazy. I don't have contact. She said, I meet the mailman at the door every day because I just need to see human life. So while it seems like this would be this great thing, it can be hard for people. And then you add to it, many of our team members may be working at home with distractions that we would normally not ever allow under work from home policy, children at home, parents that they may be attending to at home, all these kinds of things. And so these weekly meetings pull everybody together to say, let's get focused. Let's make sure we know what's going on in each other's lives. What challenges are you having? What questions do you have? This is our way to ensure that we have clear communication to everybody on a regular basis. So scheduling these weekly meetings is really important. I do really encourage you to use your webcams. I know a lot of people are like, ooh, I don't want to be on video. I hate the webcam. And I'll be honest, the hardest part about the webcams is that you have to watch yourself. You actually like seeing everybody else, but you hate having to watch yourself for most people. But webcams allow people to connect, and they keep people engaged as well. There are a couple of tools out there. GoToTraining is one of them that actually does have a sort of an attention monitor. So if somebody, for example, if you are watching this webinar or listening to this webinar and you have now flipped over to your own email, if I was using GoToTraining, it would send me an alert that said, Sandy is not being attentive. This Zoom does not have that technology. I have used it. It's effective if that's something you're particularly concerned about. But the easier way to take care of that is ask everybody to turn on their webcams so you can see people and people can interact with each other. You also then know if they're not engaged. One tip on webcams, I have had a couple of clients over the last week who have required webcams for all of their meetings. And for the most part, that has gone over very well. I've had a few people who have employees who have come forward and said, being on webcam makes me anxious and I don't want to do it. One of the ideas that we have used for that is if you have to be on webcam and somebody is just really uncomfortable with it, if they turn the webcam on, but turn the lights out in the room and just put like a small lamp behind them, it will backlight enough that you can see that the person is there and it gives them enough to engage, but it seems to be reducing the anxiety for somebody because we're not watching their facial expressions and their motions and things like that. So if you have somebody who's just really uncomfortable about the webcam, try that option. It likely will make them feel comfortable enough that they can participate with the rest of the team. The one thing, though, to keep in mind, sometimes when we're all working virtually, we can actually get a little too focused. We can be so into, look at all the work I'm getting done, that the next thing we know, we look up and we haven't spoken to somebody, or the water cooler conversation or the lunch break room discussion where you had just natural interaction with people has gone away. And so one of the things that's important as a virtual leader is to not only make sure you're connecting with people daily through scheduled meetings, but keep some of that spontaneity into this. Pick up the phone once in a while. If you haven't heard from somebody, you haven't seen an email from somebody, just pick up the phone and say, hey, checking in with you. I left a voicemail this morning. One of my employees is in Alabama. She had 2 twin grandbabies a couple of weeks ago, and she and I exchanged email. So I know she's doing okay, and we've had all sorts of work-related conversations, but I hadn't had a chance to find out how are the babies doing. So this morning was just a quick phone call to say, hey, just checking in. I know where all of your work stuff is at, but how are the grandkids? Are they home from the hospital? Are they doing okay? Those kinds of spontaneous conversations will go a long way. The other thing is, while you might want agendas for weekly meetings or for your one-on-one meetings that we're going to talk about here, the longer you can keep someone on the phone and just get them chatting, you'll start to hear that they're having frustration about something that may not necessarily be on their checklist to talk to you about, but is really important to them. So if you are an individual who likes to just get on the phone, get through the agenda, and hang up the phone, gonna need to spend a little bit more time right now leaning into the conversation to say, how are you doing? What did you do this weekend? How are things going at home? Be a little bit more connected than you might normally be. It will make a huge difference as to what you learn from your employees and mostly what questions are on their mind. The second piece that we're going to talk about today is how to engage people. Again, always important in virtual worlds because people can get really isolated and just focused on their own world and not feel like their employer or their team cares what's going on. The other reason engagement matters is a lot of times, especially if you're working right now in a team that typically is all standing right, sitting right next to each other, walking in each other's office and asking questions, some of those questions where they might or information that they might share just very naturally without thinking about it can often go away unintentionally when everybody goes home. And so all of a sudden you find disconnects amongst people, or people feeling, particularly with all the news that is hitting folks, people feeling a lot like, I'm stressing out, but no one else understands what's going on in my world. And so engaging people on a regular basis and keeping them connected to each other as well as connected to you is really important. The first and best way to do this, you as a leader do not have to be responsible for everything. And in fact, if you become the person that's trying to make everything light and fun and happy, it's actually going to wear people out. But for most of you, you have at least one, if not 2 people on your team who would absolutely love in this time something to do that's going to allow them to connect with people and be that person that's going to bring everybody together. And making them sort of your engage and connect team can make all the difference. So volunteers matter. There's a couple of ideas I'm going to give folks today that I think work really well in making that happen. One is this idea of sharing your pits and cherries and your highs and lows. So same concepts. Some people don't like the terms pits and cherries, so we've stuck in highs and lows for that group. This is actually a tool that I use for teams when they're not remote, but it's really important when somebody is remote. So when I do my meetings with my employees, one of the very first things we do every week during our weekly one-on-one is, what was your high and low from last week? And the reason that sharing that high and low matters is I get a really good sense of how high was the high and how low was the low. So right off the bat, I have a sense of how much do we need to spend time working on some key issue or key item. If the low of the low was, wow, my scratch it lottery ticket didn't win again. Well, if that's the worst thing that happened last week, we're probably okay. On the flip side, if the low is, that account I've been working on or that client I've been working with is just not getting engaged with me, well, now we probably need to stop and spend a little bit more time talking there, because somebody is probably not only frustrated from a work perspective, but may actually emotionally be having an impact. Right now, with the things that everybody is going through, these pits and cherries or highs and lows are going to be even more important, because while people are working virtually, your ability to keep them focused is going to be reliant on having a good idea of where they're at emotionally. And people are on a bit of a roller coaster. So the person you talked to today, whose high from yesterday was like, that deal I thought was going to fall apart, stuck, today might be at the bottom because something outside of work is stressing them out. And so keeping these conversations going. This is also a really fun activity to do with the entire team. So make this part of your weekly meetings with your team as well as your one-on-ones. The reason it's so much fun on a team is everybody just keeps, we probably learn more about each other, which is really important. Trust matters, particularly in any team environment, but particularly when you're working virtually. It takes a little bit more effort to keep that level of trust high. So if we understand what's going on in each other's lives and we know each other a little bit better, we're more likely to trust each other. And then when something goes wrong, we're going to be a little bit more likely to assume good intent and keep things moving forward. One of the other ways you can get people connected is these theme days and contests. And trust me, I hesitated on putting this in because I know folks are going, we're worried about all of this stuff and she wants us to do a theme day or a contest. Like, what is she thinking? I will tell you, having taken a team of people through in 08 or 09, I was the recruiting director for Progressive Insurance. We went through a obviously major change. For those of you who are familiar with 08 and 09 and what happened from an economic downturn perspective, we had a team of 70 recruiters and we had to redeploy them to other departments across the company. And most of them, I would say probably about 70% of them worked remotely. And so one of the things we had to do was figure out, our hope was things would come back, and it did, and they'd all be back on our team. And we needed to make sure that they were really engaged so that they didn't feel like we had left them on an island during this hard time. And now they come back and we want them to be productive and excited to be there. So it was really important that we take care of people emotionally during this and we keep people connected and engaged. So we actually built an Engage and Connect team, and we started to put together some really cool theme days. And I think these all work really well today with what's going on. You have people working from home with their kids sitting next to them homeschooling. That is just not a world any of us expected. So find ways to help them share what's going on in their daily lives. Many of us, and with restaurants changing, we're not eating out. So guess what? We're cooking. I don't cook. So if I had to cook dinner last night, I probably have a recipe that's worth sharing. So have people just easily share, like, what's the recipe your family made this week that was fun? What was something different you tried from a food perspective that was fun? What fell apart? One of the virtual team things we did was we had an International Diversity Day, and we said, everybody make a meal from some different culture other than, your normal cheeseburger and French fries. Pick a meal from a culture you're not used to, make it, and then share with us how it went. Those can be really helpful. Gratitude days, or just finding ways to share gratitude with each other. What are you grateful for today? Particularly right now, will not only engage people, but help people stay focused. Dress up days at home. So I debated on sharing a picture of this one, but when I was a virtual employee with Progressive, Halloween was a huge event at Progressive. They had kids walking through the building, doing, in their Halloween costumes, all the employees dressed up. It was big. So as a virtual employee, you always felt sort of left out. So we finally figured this out, and instead of leaving our virtual employees out, when they did the contest, the costume contest, they actually had all the virtual employees, you had to dress up at home. We had a team meeting in the morning where we all got on our webcam so everybody could see, even if you were home, that I was dressed up in my flapper outfit. And then we sent in pictures. And the team we brought in judges from another team, but we had a contest on who had the best Halloween costume. And it wasn't just the team of people that was sitting right next to each other in Tampa, but I had to go downstairs to my apartment building and ask the property management people if they would take my picture. There's really cardinal shirts, blue shirts, take opening day if we're still working virtually, the day that was supposed to be opening day, and turn it into Cardinals days. It will just remind people that we still care about our team members, even if we're not there, and it will help people engage with you as a leader in different ways. So keep it light, keep it fun. I've seen some things on Facebook around coworker pictures. So people are with people home with their children and their dogs and so forth. They've said, what did your coworker do today? But in this case, the coworker is the dog or the team member. Those are other good options that make sense. I put out a post today that was, I'm building a new playlist. Tell me what song makes you sing at the top of your lungs, regardless of what kind of mood you're in. I'll make a playlist out of it and, and play it in my car instead of having to listen to the radio. So all of those give you ideas of how to keep people engaged as we go along. So we do have, I'm going to stop there for a question. We've got a couple of people who have put in questions. Feel free to add to this list, but I will read some of these and go ahead and answer them. So one of the questions is, how would you apply engaged concepts when your team is primarily volunteers who have other jobs? Yeah, you know what? That's a great question. I'm volunteering for several organizations today. I'm actually on the board of 2 and just retired as chair of a 3rd in August. And we're struggling with that same piece because people do have a lot going on. What's interesting about the volunteer opportunities is many of us volunteer because it's our passion. It's that thing that that fills up our heart. The great part is you are then in a perfect opportunity to help fill up their heart when they might otherwise be struggling. So I would absolutely say do the same thing, send fun things out, and yes, less frequent is great. It's a good option. One of the contests that is a really easy thing to do, and I still laugh that it worked so well. So one of my Engage and Connect teams decided to play virtual bingo. And there's websites, if you Google bingo card, free bingo cards, there are websites where you can download fun bingo cards. So there's an emoji bingo card, and you can do numbers, you can do holidays, whatever you want. But download the bingo cards. Then once a day, you randomly pull a picture off of the bingo cards, and the bingo cards, everybody gets their own card. So we emailed them out. And once a day, somebody would send the picture for that day's bingo card. Now, I will tell you, I am not like games and fluff don't work in my personality style at all. And when the team came to me and said this, I was like, we're going to play, they called it Snowy Bingo. And I was like, we're going to play Snowy Bingo? And they're like, absolutely, people are going to love it. I'm like, oh God, we're going to try this once and it's never going to work again. I will tell you, they are now 15 years out from the first round of Snowy Bingo for the recruiting department at Progressive Insurance, and they are still playing it today. I talked to my friend, I'm like, they're pulling out Snowy Bingo, aren't they? She's like, absolutely. Even in the years where we had people deployed to other departments, we had employees who were working for other departments who emailed us and said, please tell me we're not letting go of Snowy Bingo. These things don't have to cost any money. They don't have to be complicated, but they make all the difference in just giving somebody 2 or 3 minutes to let their brain go and remember that they liked their coworkers to start with and they miss them and they want to be connected. The next question, how do you make sure when you're engaging, it doesn't appear you don't trust that the employees are actually working? That's a great one. Let me make sure I read the rest of it. I like to trust that people know their jobs and are doing them, but don't want them to feel on an island, so to speak. Yeah, you know what? I think just being really honest with people. If you tell people up front, here's why I'm doing this, I recognize that this is going to feel weird for us. We're going to feel like on an island. I'm going to take that extra effort. Please know I trust you immensely. I'm actually checking in with you to make sure you're okay. If you are honest and sincere with people, they will absolutely appreciate every single phone call. The last one, great ideas on engagement. Thank you. Glad you like them. I play the high-low game with my kids at dinner. Oh, that's so much fun. The people that I know who do this with their children, they absolutely say it's the most amazing thing ever. So I had one of my clients who took it home after we tried it with his team for the first time. He implemented it with his kids at dinner. And it just gives you a really good check-in. So hopefully those are some really practical ways to go back, like I said, this afternoon and do something a little different that will help resonate with your team and keep people connected. Again, I cannot stress, as a leader, you do not have to be the one coming up with all of these. Once you start sharing a couple of ideas and then open it up for brainstorming, people will get excited that you're suggesting it, and they will chime in with all sorts of fun stuff all on their own. So the third piece that we want to talk about, so we talked about communicate, we talked about engage. The third piece is focus. Everything I've talked about now, up till now, really focuses on, like, let's make sure people are okay, because that's a really important part. We will get through this, and when we do, we want these people to feel like we were the leaders that helped them. But the reality is, we do still have important work to get done. So how do you get people to focus? There's also the added value for those of you going, ooh, that sounds like a harsh business thing to say. It is, but there's the other piece, which is, honestly, many employees right now need something to focus on. So if you can help give them focus, you're helping them as well. So think of it both directions if that feels, if that's more comforting to you. I have had so many people tell me, I just can't wait to go to work because I can just do what I do every day and it feels normal. And normal is a really big deal right now. So when it comes to focus, review job descriptions. So for some of you, this may mean pull them out of a drawer and dust off all the cobwebs and shake them up a little bit because you maybe haven't looked at these lately, or maybe you don't have them at all. The key is you need to sit down with each employee and talk about what are the responsibilities of your role. And it's particularly important right now. This is on every slide I've ever talked about when I talk about leading virtually. But in today's world where we didn't plan for this, and this is people who's never worked from home before, this is key. So even if you don't have the cobwebbed piece of paper, you need to sit down and talk to the employee and say, okay, let's get aligned on what you're responsible for today. What are the things that are going to be your key priorities? Where do I want you spending your time? Some employees are, if their job is like some of the things that they did, they need to be in the office for, and now they're at home, they're spinning and they don't know where to turn. They want to do good work. They want to be engaged, but they don't know what to do with their time. For many of them too, where they need to spend their time may shift. So for example, I have clients who are like, all the things we needed to get done can't. In association world, their events may be getting canceled. There are things that they were planning to produce over the next 2 weeks. I have a client who is in print production. All of their orders are on hold until this ends. So what are their employees supposed to work on? What we did was say, you know what? Focus on a couple of key things. First and foremost, when this passes and we are all moving to get back to life as normal, what are the things we're going to need to be prepared to run on really fast? So how do you use this time to get ready? Other things, if there isn't something in that space, this is the perfect time to do things like document processes and procedures. Because guess what? There's things that are going to change about the way we do work going forward. So let's think that through. Other folks need to get projects done that have been that project we've been wanting to do for 2 or 3 years, but we haven't yet gotten to. So this is the opportunity to sit down with every employee and say, okay, let's talk about what your role has always been and what your priorities were. Now let's talk about, does any of that shift going forward? What that's going to do is bring all of your employees back to center and say, all right, I now know the plan. I know what my key focus is. Now I can move forward. It just stops the world for spinning for everybody right now. It's also really important as you go forward, if we're working from home for a long period of time, you do need to be able to have performance conversations with people. And if you haven't aligned on the front end, that conversation is going to get really awkward as you go through these weekly one-on-ones. Second piece, align on weekly and daily priorities. This is going to feel for some of you like micromanagement, and that is not what I'm suggesting. But particularly right now, while things are shifting, people want to do good work. They care, but they're also a little scared. So if you're really clear with them on, let's make sure you and I are aligned, because that's going to set you up for success, they're going to feel really good about that. So it's okay to say, you know what, let's start on Monday morning. Do all your weekly one-on-ones on Monday and say, you know what, go through with every employee, what are your priorities for this week? Or maybe Friday's the better day for you and you want to wrap up Friday with what are your priorities for next week? But have the conversation. Even the people who totally know what they're doing have external factors coming at them that they're going to need just a little bit of support, and no matter what, they're going to like the fact that you thought what they were doing is important. The worst thing an employee could feel right now with all the uncertainty is, I don't know if my leader thinks what I do is important. So if they know you care about what their priorities are, you're messaging to them what you do here is important. Set and track deadlines. Make sure, again, deadlines can be adjusted because the world will change, but most importantly, if you set them, it helps give people focus, and focus is helping them can know where to spend their time and to spend it on the right things. Schedule one-on-ones. Many of us, when we work at, in an office setting, one-on-ones are sort of random conversations. That does not work in a virtual environment. You need the extra spontaneous conversations, but you absolutely need something scheduled. So every single person, minimum 30 minutes. My recommendation, given what everything is going on, is an hour, depending on the size of your team, if it's doable. You or the direct report and the employee, an hour on the phone. That gives you a little bit of time to do the highs and lows and the chat about, you know, how's it like working home with your dog and everything else that needs to go into the rapport building. And then you get down to business on, okay, so what are the priorities? What are the challenges you face this week? What are the questions you have that I still owe you answers for? These one-on-ones are going to be super, super critical in the coming week. So I would say weekly at a minimum. If you're not having an opportunity to connect spontaneously with folks in between, you might think about scheduling twice a week, sometime sort of beginning and middle, just to check in and see how people are doing. The last piece around focus is making sure people have a set schedule. So, and this, when I say set, that doesn't mean it's not flexible, but people who know, like, especially if they've always worked at the office and you were an office where people, you know, oh, I go in at 8 and I leave at 5. This is going to sound like you might be thinking, why is she so worried about how many hours are people putting in? I'm not worried that people aren't working. I'm actually worried that people won't shut down. Individuals who work from home, particularly when it's a good escape from everything else going on in the world, forget to shut it down. So they leave the laptop on the dining room table, and then when they're walking by at 8 o'clock at night, they're like, oh, you know, I'll just get that one more thing done. That burns people out, and it can be overwhelming. So please make sure you know what people are working, especially if they've got kids. Come up with schedules that work. I've got some clients that have employees working from like 5:30 to 9. And then they're doing homeschool with the kids from like 9 to 2. And then they're coming back and working from 2 to 5. Whatever the arrangement is, be flexible with it, but try to help the employees get on a set pattern. It'll actually make their lives easier. Again, this is not about micromanaging. It's about helping. Oh, sorry. Thank you, Dennis. Great question. So it's just got a question in about how many folks have people working from home. I looked at the answers and saw the raised hands, but I forgot to tell you all the answers. So great question. Actually, everyone on the call raised their hands that they now have folks working from home. So everybody is very much in the same boat on this one, and it's a new set of challenges. This chart in the corner helps you think through this idea of aligning on daily and weekly priorities. So this is something we should be using with every employee, but sometimes we get lost in the day-to-day, and this is a really good opportunity to help your employees think through what do they have that's urgent and important, and let's make sure that those are getting key priorities. If we have things that aren't urgent but are important, and this honestly may be some of what you've got going on right now, is we have things that are really important pieces of work to do, but they haven't historically been urgent. This is a perfect time to spend time working on those kinds of projects. Now, what you don't want to do is especially right now while people are feeling a little bit extra stress, don't make people work on things that feel urgent and not important. People need meaningful work, and definitely don't spend time on things that are not urgent and not important. Hopefully we're never spending time there, but making sure people are working on things that are important, even if they aren't necessarily urgent, will help keep people focused and engaged. You have to remember on the focus side of things, this is not a normal virtual setting. Normal virtual settings, we tell employees things like, don't have your kids at home, don't be taking care of a parent while you're home. Make sure you're working standard hours. Don't have your TV on, all those kinds of things. The reality is life is coming at folks. So we've got to help them have that opportunity to have that break and be focused and know what they're working on matters. It's really about helping them help themselves. So self-care, this is the support side of things. Your job as a leader is to support people from beginning to end, and self-care is part of that. If everybody would just do me a favor, stop for a second, close your eyes, just take one deep breath. That may be the hokiest thing somebody has ever asked you to do on a webinar, but I got to tell you, I started meditating on January 1st of this year. I decided that 10 minutes a day, I was going to use the Calm app and just try this meditation thing. And I was going to try it for 65 straight days. Thank God I did, and I stuck with it for 65 days because the year was going fabulously and I was loving it, and it was just a good way for me to remember sometimes you just got to breathe. I tell people all the time, and my nieces sometimes call me hippie Katie from this perspective, but oxygen to the brain is good. We all need it. And I don't know if you've noticed, but just taking that deep breath, you may have felt like, wow, I was holding my breath and I didn't even realize it. Everybody right now is sort of holding at least part of their breath in. And when we take time for something as easy as take a deep breath, we suddenly let go a little bit and we're able to move forward. So that's one of the pieces that matters when we talk about self-care and taking care of making sure people are in the best state possible. Dedicated workspace is really important. Again, I don't necessarily in this case mean like everybody must have an office, because under the circumstances we're in and how quickly people are having to pivot, that may not be possible. But what I would tell you is encourage your team members to try to find places that aren't in the middle of their normal living space. For years when I worked from home, I was in a one-bedroom apartment, and my workspace was my living room. I never turned my laptop off. I would eat dinner and sit down to watch TV and just kind of look at it and be like, I'm not doing anything else. Maybe I'll just get on and play with that. I would walk past it and it would make me think about something I was working on. You want your folks to be able to turn this off. at the right times for them and for their family. And if they put it right in the middle of everything, it's going to make it really hard for them to do that. So try to find places that when they leave, whether it's a spare bedroom, someplace in the house that they don't have to walk by all the time, but when they leave, the laptop stays there and they get to just focus on their family and the other important things in their lives right now. Make sure people are disconnecting at night, whatever night looks like based on their schedules. Think through alternative schedules. Make sure folks are take that break. Even if you didn't normally take a lunch at the office, you know what? Get up from your chair when you're at home and go downstairs or go to the kitchen, wherever the kitchen may be, and make food and take time to actually eat it. Don't take it back to your desk. Think about alternative schedule options. Some folks this might be a perfect time to think about 4 10-hour days. So that they have a day where they can kind of let go or focus on the other things that they need to in life. Others may need, honestly, there might be people, if you're homeschooling, the opportunity to maybe stretch your 40 hours over and do some on the weekends might be beneficial. And if it's work from home, do you care if they're doing a couple hours on Saturday or Sunday? You might not. So really think creatively about how to help people make this work for them under the situations. Consider personal styles. I put this one in because some of you may remember that last year I did a presentation for this group on understanding personal styles and leveraging those in the workplace. If you've done any work in the space of personal styles, so these are things like Myers-Briggs, DISC assessments, any of those sort of standard tests that tell you how you like to be communicated with and how you communicate with others. This is really important. If you are on any sort of social media, you have probably seen somebody in your group of friends say, this is really hard for the extrovert. I'll tell the story myself and one of my employees. I'm a huge extrovert. The only good thing is my husband is also an extrovert. So I think we're actually like helping each other through this from an isolation perspective. But in terms of I have friends that are extreme introverts and this is the best week of their lives. They're so excited. So Catherine, one of the employees on my team, is a total introvert. So talking to her today, I'm like, how you doing? Are you feeling are you doing okay? And she's like, yeah, I'm great. Why would you ask that? I was like, are you all right? She lives by herself. And so I said, well, you've been by yourself. Are you going crazy? You're going stir crazy? She's like, Katie, I've been home since Saturday. This is probably the best week I've had. Nobody's bothering me. So you're going to have folks that are loving that, and that's wonderful. But watch out for your folks who are normally the folks that need that people attention. They use that contact with other human beings to fill up their battery. And what's happening this week is that battery is getting drained, and they may not even realize that that's what's not filling it up. So I've got Catherine, who's ecstatic that she's been home since Saturday and all in her little cubby by herself, and she's loving it. On the flip side, my other team member, Kathy, I called her yesterday to just say, hey, how are things going? It was right before our one-on-one. And she's in a great place, but Kathy is my hugger. Kathy loves to hug the entire world. Well, here's the hard part for Kathy. Not only, first of all, she's my business development specialist. So she's been out normally would be out networking with people, and she'd be out networking with people, hugging them. She can't network with people right now because of all that's going on, and she really can't hug people. First thing I did when we got on our one-on-one, which we do every week virtually over the phone, I said, you know what, do me a favor, jump on GoToMeeting. And so we jump on, turn on our webcams, we get to see each other. I'm like, how you doing when you can't hug somebody? She's like, oh, it's been really hard. You gotta know people's personal styles and reach out when it makes sense and make sure that they feel like you understand them and you know it. I'm gonna open things up for questions here in just a minute, so feel free to start typing things in. The bottom line is whatever your circumstance was before, whether you always had people working from home or this is the first time, this is all different for us. And there are some really easy, really good things you can do as a leader to make sure that at the end of the day, you're communicating, you're engaging, you're focusing people, and most importantly, you're supporting people. So that as we work our way through this, you're building a connection with people that will never, ever change. And at the end of the day, you'll be perfectly positioned to bring this team back together. When this all starts turning back on, you'll be ready to move forward in a way that is meaningful, and more importantly, with a team that is behind you 100%. I'm going to hop into some of the questions. I am going to give you all, actually real quickly, I'm going to move back to, while I'm doing those questions, two things. First of all, if you'd like a copy of this presentation, if you want to text HR info to the number on the screen, we will email, it'll ask you for your email address, and go ahead and put that in, and we'll send you these presentation materials. In addition to that, if you don't like the text two things, you also have the option, just send us an email at hr@peoplesolutionscenter.com. We'll be happy to send you this presentation so that it's helpful. I'm gonna go to some of the questions here as we go. So the first one, they come in and they move at the same time. The first question that we have is, what strategies, where did it go? What strategies are folks already implementing? Okay, great. So I'd love to hear from folks as well. If you've got best practices, put them in the chat. Somebody asked the question to the group. This chat is a great way through the technology to keep people engaged as you go. That's a great opportunity. That's fantastic. So somebody responded, we've got 10 employees, 7 of them work from outside of the country, do monthly staff meetings, and also utilize tools like SharePoint, and now moving to Teams. Teams, if you've used it, I've heard nothing but good things from my clients who are using it. It's supposed to be a really, really helpful way to do that. It makes a big difference from that perspective. Yeah, somebody said, after their annual meeting, they have people stay and they do things in person. That is one thing that I would, certainly start thinking about when we come off of this and everybody's been virtual. One of the things you might want to think about is when everybody comes back, which hopefully soon, right? What does that first day back look like? Start thinking about how will you celebrate that for people, and how will you engage people in that setting in a way that says, you know what, we're together, we're here, we did it. In addition, you may have people who then say, you know what, I really liked that. Can I work from home anyway, like all the time? And quite honestly, you need to be ready and prepared to think about your policies and procedures going forward. You may learn that work from home, if you've said, oh, that won't work here, you may find out it does. And you need to be prepared to think about what that looks like going forward. I guarantee you will have at least a couple of people that start to ask that. Asana, oh, my favorite tool ever. So for those of you who aren't familiar with it, Asana is a project management tool. It does work really well for the focus part of this. So it's really helpful on keeping people focused. And so I strongly suggest, if you have not used it, it's a great way to do that piece. Liz, you're absolutely right, though, that it doesn't necessarily have a personal touch. So adding that weekly one-on-one with people, and use Asana to walk through. So it helps you get through that conversation faster because you can look at Asana ahead of time and get prepped for the discussion. But that one-on-one conversation to say, great job, we had that deadline and you did a great job on it. Or, hey, I see we're running close on that deadline. Is there something you need from me? So use those kinds of project management tools, but have the personal conversations when people are virtual. We get a little sucked into technology and we forget that the conversation matters. I'm going to pause there. Are there any other questions that folks have on leading virtual teams? Great. Well, folks are maybe, oh, yes. So this could be a different conversation. What about coaching virtually? The great news is everything we talked about here applies when we're coaching. So one of the things I absolutely recommend when you're coaching virtually, webcam matters. When we're coaching, so think about coaching is different than managing. Coaching is, how do I develop somebody? How am I invested in them? Imagine the MLB players trying to learn to play baseball via the phone. It's probably not going to be the same. Webcam matters when you're coaching. It gives you the opportunity to share your screen. it gives you the opportunity to share live, like interact with each other on case studies. So if there's some area you're trying to coach somebody on, and I always suggest if you're doing coaching, this is a great time to use conversations like, what should this person start doing, stop doing, continue doing? Those are harder conversations on the phone, especially if somebody's not used to it. So if you turn on the webcam, suddenly, like, oh yeah, you're still the same person on the end of the phone. It also gives you the body language that goes with coaching and is really important. So they can see you smile when you're giving that advice. They know that you're being caring and empathetic about what you're saying, but you're still giving advice or suggestions or guidance in a different direction. So use the webcam because body language will matter when you're doing coaching. Yeah, so somebody said they know somebody who started a new job on Monday and they're doing virtual onboarding. I actually have 3 clients this week alone that we have built virtual onboarding plans for because they had new hires starting and they're like, we can't do, like, we have to delay their start date, but we need them to work. And I said, you don't have to delay their start date. There is nothing about onboarding that cannot be done virtually. There, you just have to be creative about thinking through how you do it and help people understand and learn, but share your documents, use webcams. Like I said, I have had multiple employees in my career that I or nor anybody else in the company ever met them until they had been here 3 months. And that's a huge, like, that's a long time to never have met somebody in person from the company. She has now been there for 12 years and couldn't be happier with the organization. So in-person doesn't matter, engaging does. And there's a lot of ways to do that virtually today. So don't let it intimidate you, but think about your options. The other piece that I'm just going to share as we hang up today, so 2 pieces as folks are going through a lot of changes. I want to make sure that folks, and this is not a sales pitch, it is simply just know that these resources are out there. A lot of organizations do not have in-house HR people right now. And I will tell you, even for the organizations that do have in-house HR people, those HR people are really working hard to figure out answers for folks. But if you don't have somebody in that capacity, you likely have a lot of questions and may not know where to go. Just so you all know, People Solutions Center does have an option that is it's a 90-day Ask Your HR Expert package that is available to folks that have never had an HR person but have a lot of questions about how to navigate these changes and what all of this means. If you want any information on that, all you have to do is email us. We'll call you. We'll give you the information so that at least you know it's out there for you. Most importantly, though, take care of yourself in all of this too. One of the best things I ever learned as a leader was, if I can't take care of me, I'm not doing a very good job of taking care of the people I'm leading. So don't forget all the things that I just said to you, particularly about self-care and support. You need to internalize first. And even if they sound hippie or they sound weird for what you do, find something. I suggested to my husband this morning that he meditate. He laughed at me. He actually literally laughed in my face. But on the flip side, I said, well, if you don't do that, go for a walk on the treadmill upstairs for at least 20 minutes. So I hope you all found this really helpful. I am going to throw this back to Denise to close us up for the day. Thank you for having me for the first ever SLSAE webinar. Hopefully this is something that you all find useful enough that even when you can get back together, you find ways to leverage these tools. So thank you and have a fabulous day.
Katie, thank you. There was a lot of great information in there that I personally will put to use. I appreciate that. I'll also be passing along this info to others in our office. We'll be making Katie's PowerPoint available to each of you via an email that will be distributed with the survey about today's meeting as well. So be watching for that in your email. These are certainly unprecedented times in our country, and I hope that each of you will carefully manage the need to keep yourself informed about the coronavirus and the need to take time away from the issue. The media coverage on this crisis takes me back to the days immediately following 9/11, where there was virtually nothing available on TV but the unfolding events. You reach a point where you have to turn off the TV, and today social media as well, in order to maintain some normalcy in your life and a general cheerfulness about you. And Katie talked about some of that. It's my wish that each of you strive to find this balance in the coming days and weeks. We don't know how long this will last. Over the coming days and weeks, as we watch this world that we live in change around us, take time, as Katie said, to call a friend, check on an elderly person, check on family members, use email, phone, Skype. Sit on your deck, not today, but another day. Read a book. If your kids are at home, do a puzzle with them. Spend some time, play a game, make their learning fun. But please, take care of yourself and be safe. Thanks for being here today, and have a productive afternoon.